things that if you go to couples counseling today, there's a particular, we have like a superstar, right, in couples counseling that many people have heard of. For us, the Gottmans, is that a familiar name to anybody? Does that sound, yeah, a little bit? If you've been here, okay. The Gottmans are like the Steph Curry of couples counseling, right? Or, something comparable or whatever sport you love, right? So the reason is about 50 years ago, John Gottman was wondering like what actually made for effective couples therapy. People had a lot of ideas what they thought worked, but what did the evidence show? And it wasn't clear. And so he and Robert Levinson teamed up, and they figured out how to measure people's emotional responses and to track them. And they started doing really in-depth studies. In fact, 40 years ago, they developed a love lab in the state of Washington. So I have a friend who's from Seattle area, and he's like, "Oh, the Gottmans are like our celebrities. Like this, it's the real deal." Um, and in the love lab, they discovered that they were tracking newlyweds, and they would have them be in the love lab for 24 hours, and they would catalog everything they could, micro expressions, how they responded, who spoke first, who spoke second, everything they could think of, right? And then they followed these couples for decades, and they were able to go back and look at their data and see what predicted couple and happiness, like relationship demise and divorce. What were the predicting factors, and were they evident in that initial love lab experience? Well, it turns out in a 20-minute interview with newlyweds, the Gottmans can predict with up to, one study is 94% accuracy, but upwards of 90% accuracy whether a couple will divorce within 5 years or at year 16 and a half. I mean, it's really remarkable, right? And so it doesn't mean we're all doomed, I promise. It feels like we are sometimes, right? Like life is tough and complicated, but it turns out with that prediction, we can figure out what the antidotes to those very things they can identify are to help improve our relationships and increase relationship happiness over time and decrease the risk of divorce. And not like to live in unhappy marriages, but to make it better. So that's why we really want to get into the community, because it's just sometimes we make life harder than it needs to be, and we're just doing our best, but there are things we don't know. So that's kind of how we're dividing up this season of dinners. We hope you're welcome to join us at each one or not. It's totally up to you. We have 3 in a row. We're going to build on the Sound Relationship House that we have on your table. You should all have one. And what the Gottmans were able to do, basically 30 years ago, this is when they discovered about the accuracy of their findings, 1994, right? And then in 20 years ago, they were able to predict, more what couples were able to do differently. And then they took all of this really evidence-based research and translated it into like really usable, functional information that we can kind of digest in a pretty straightforward way. So it's not meant to be like, oh, you have to know this, specific key to this thing, right? It's really digestible. And they have several books that you can get. We have a few up here, and in fact, we'll have a raffle later for one of them. It's a little fancy. We have the Love Prescription and the Relationship Cure, and they have like 7 Dates, and Fight Right is their new book about how to have effective conflict. And that one, the next session, we will actually talk about conflict. Today, we're just doing the good stuff. I get the good stuff. Just, somebody else gets something else next time. But it's worth knowing that when I'm sharing these things, it's okay if something shows up for you and this is tough, right? Like if you're stuck on something, it doesn't mean something is wrong. It just means there's something that we can pay attention to and think about, what do we want to do with this thing that maybe we haven't addressed in our marriage? Or there's a hole in this place that we haven't really figured out how to heal. And we want to figure out how do we do that in a way that creates something new. And then we have a chance to really create intimacy that we all feel really good about. So I'm not going to spend as much time on the things that lead to relationship demise and divorce, but I will say that the things I identified were 4 primary factors. The first 4 are we call them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The four horsemen of the apocalypse. And this is what newlyweds, if they could show up in the newlywed interview. If there was criticism, criticism is stating one's complaints as a defect in your partner's personality, giving the partner negative trait attributions. Example, you always talk about yourself. You are so selfish. That is criticism. Okay? And when you're critical, you invite defensiveness, which is another one. Defensiveness is self-protection in the form of righteous indignation or innocent victimhood. I don't know what that is at all. Defensiveness wards off a perceived attack. Example, it's not my fault that we're always late, it's your fault, right? So if somebody's critical, it invites defensiveness. Both of those are predictors. Another one is contempt. Statements that come from a relative position of superiority, right? Contempt is the greatest predictor of divorce and must be eliminated. Example, you're an idiot. But do you know what another example is? Just rolling your eyes. So if as newlyweds, they roll their eyes, it's a sign of contempt. So there's subtle things we can do, and you might want to be like, oh my gosh, I want to roll my eyes. And I'm just saying, there are antidotes to each of these, and we can do them differently. They don't have to be the same. The next one is stonewalling, which is another predictor of divorce, which is emotional withdrawal from interaction with physiological arousal. So the listener doesn't give the speaker the usual nonverbal signals that the listener is tracking this, their partner, but they might, emotionally remove themselves. So one of the things we work on is how to move forward, instead of pulling back emotionally in those moments when you're scared of the unpleasant emotion maybe you want to share, and you might think you're protecting your partner. But what we learn is that actually conflict doesn't predict divorce. It's not the conflict, it's how we handle these things, right? Okay, you with me? So today we're going to talk about the sound relationship house, which I love. So fun. And my husband's not here because he has meetings, but I was talking about this last night, and I was like, I know I'm presenting on the sound relationship house, and he was like, what? I was like, I'm a terrible wife. I literally do this all day, every day, and I talk about Gottman method, and he didn't know this basic framework. So I have work to do, and he would, so we went over it, but he did know it. He was familiar with it. He just didn't know it by that designation. But basically, the research about what makes for a healthy, happy marriage is built into this sound relationship house. Typically, we would start with walls of trust and commitment, but tonight we are not doing that. Tonight, we are just doing the bottom 4 levels of the house, and I'll talk about each of them. But just understand that even though it looks really simple, they're very distinct constructs. They have very distinct needs that are necessary for each level of the house. So if as we're going, something is challenging, we want to deal with it, because just like if you in your own house, if you had, if some place is in need of renovation, right? Like one floor has, stains on the carpet or something, or has to be cut out, we're going to deal with that, right? And then we can make it better and renovate it. And it's a pain for a little bit to handle, but then we create something new that we feel better about, right? So this is not shame-based. This is meant to be constructive. How do we work to build something better? Okay. So the way I wanted to approach this is that the first 3 levels we consider the friendship levels of the house. And they're really pivotal in your relationship. And the way I thought about it tonight, and because for us, this is the regular, as counselors, we're thinking about this on the regular, right? The first 3 levels are have a specific function. So tonight I want to think about it a little bit like, I want you to imagine in your mind, maybe that you're in New York City or in Brooklyn. I used to live in Brooklyn, and we'd walk by the brownstones every day. We didn't have a brownstone, but walk by the brownstones, and you have these houses that have multiple levels, right, on them. So as we talk about each level, I want you to think about it as a level on your imaginary brownstone, okay? So the first level is this level of building love maps. So I want you to imagine that you're walking up these like brownstone steps, and you open the front door and you walk in, and it's your spouse's dream house, right? Yours too. There's space for you too, for both of you. But I want you to think in your mind How would you know and recognize that this is my spouse's dream house? What would you see? When it comes to building your love maps, it entails how well we as partners know one another, our partner's inner psychological world, their worries, their stresses, their joys, and their dreams. Um, a love map is the essential guide to our partner's inner world. Who is our partner's best friend? Do they have a picture on the wall of their best friend? Do you know who that is? Apart from you, but you know. Um, did they have a happy childhood? How do, how do they like to relax after an intense day? What show is on Netflix? Or you walk to the next room and you hear the radio on. What song brings them delight when they're happy? And which one shows you that like the market is down and they're like not okay, right? I hope you're having like a pretty clear vision in your mind that you would know immediately what your partners, what would make up them specifically and not somebody else, right? Sometimes we can get stuck and build that level in a way that is stuck in time and we haven't moved ahead with our partner to where they are now, right? We might remember their favorite color from when they were in sixth grade, which is important, but what is it now? And that seems silly or little, right? But we change over time as partners, and there's goodness in that, right? Part of what we're trying to build is these flexible relationships, this flexible marriage that adapts to changing needs of the system, right? Kids growing up, launching children, which we're in the process of, doing. And all those kind of things. But when you think about this world, you can just imagine like what would make it sweet for your partner. How would you know? Well, I know my husband, he doesn't often go on Facebook. When he does, a while ago, I've told the story before, but AI like had a perfect algorithm for him, right? He would look at his feed and it would be a mountain cabin surrounded by a river with a hot artisan pizza right in the foreground, right? And I was like, he was like, wow, this is amazing. It knows me really well, right? And it did, right? Do we know our partner that well that we would know like what the thing is that would be like make them super happy, right? Um, anyway, so how's that going as you're thinking about this exercise? That's okay. Are you imagining what would be on your wall too? What would Netflix show would be on or not, right? Are you listening to opera or watching a basketball game? Like what makes up your world? Okay. So that's the first floor of the house, right? This building love maps of really knowing our partner's internal world. And the nice thing is we can get curious. Do we know if someone came to the door, it would be really stressful for our partner if that person showed up? Do we know who at work brings them a lot of tension that they haven't figured out how to navigate things with, right? These aren't all positive, but they can be. I can feel myself wanting to do therapy things, but I'm not going to. So anyway, just feeling it. Okay. The next floor, now you have a moment, you kind of really thoroughly explored this floor, and maybe sometime in your date night you can talk about a little bit, just anything that came to mind. Because actually we feel like our partner knows this about us, but that sense of curiosity and delight really helps to build that and rebuild that floor if maybe it needs some renovating. So the second floor of the house, we decide we're going to walk up, and in this Brooklyn brownstone, it's kind of this narrow, a narrow stairwell, and so there's a narrow stairwell, and the next one we go up, and then we see instead on the walls a wall of sharing fondness and admiration. This one is this level focuses on the amount of affection and respect within a relationship. So everyone needs to hear good things about themselves. And this is actually vocalizing the things we appreciate about our partner. So in this one, we think about characteristics of our partner. Maybe it's a picture. Maybe we have a gallery wall on this floor, and it's a picture of the ways that they're creative and a memory of a story of how they were creative. I want you to think of 3 things to maybe share with your partner if you get a chance. So creative, if they're brave or intelligent or or the ways they might be gracious or shy, or just something you value about them. And a picture that kind of illustrates this attribute. That's a way of sharing fondness and admiration, is attaching an attribute or this adjective with the story and sharing it with your partner. So let them know what it is. And then there's another set of stairs, and you decide to walk up these stairs. And when you go up this floor, this is the turning towards floor. We're actually going to focus on that tonight on our activity that we have for you. Catherine's going to introduce that in a little bit. But I will say that on the turning towards floor, one of the things we know, another predictor of relationship demise and divorce, where people who only take bids for connection 30% of the time are more likely to have relationship demise and divorce. If it's 80% of the time, they stay together. And a bid for connection, you're going to learn what that is. But basically, it's a way that your partner is reaching out, and they might say something like, "Hey, do you see that bluebird outside?" You might not care so much about bluebirds, but they're saying, "Do you care about what I care about? Do you, does what matters to me matters to you?" And you don't actually have to do a lot. You don't have to like fawn over bluebirds, but you could say, "Oh, that's delightful." It just has to be a verbal response when it's a bid for connection. And that's part of this turning towards. There are other ways your partner can turn towards each other, right? You can talk about, "Hey, when's the last time they did that? Maybe you went on a kid-free date like tonight." Way to go, all of you. Maybe we shared breakfast together. Maybe we went to a religious service together. Maybe we just took time for us, or did a hobby, or tried pickleball, and whatever it is. But these are ways you can just acknowledge that you're turning towards each other and you're learning new things together. Okay, so that's the first 3 levels, friendship levels of the Sound Relationship House. That is the basis of what comes next. Now, if you do have things like addiction in these levels, we call it or Gottmans call it an uninvited invited guest. So addiction might be that person that is the guest that is staying that you don't really want there, but one partner's brought them in. And so if that's the case, you might need more support because it can kind of do damage on those initial floors. Anyway, and the reason I bring that up is because the next floor is the positive perspective. So if you have challenges with the first 3 floors, instead of being the positive perspective, you might be in negative sentiment override, where you can't even take in 50% of what your partner does that is positive. You see it as negative. And when you move to positive perspective, it takes some time to build up these floors again. And you just have to be patient with the process so you can have a most generous interpretation of an event. So if your partner just kisses you quickly as you walk out the door, instead of feeling offended, you could go, "Oh, I know they're running and I'm glad they thought to check it, say goodbye," right? Now, this is living in reality. We're not pretending like it's something that it's not, but we want the most generous interpretation. We know we're kind of can be taking the positive perspective and not in negative sentiment override. I would say, if you're in a place where that's hard to take in, or you go to a date night and you're feeling in this negative place, it might just be that you just need some more work on those floors, and that's okay. It just is a tune-up that's needed, right? And we think about that as therapy, that we do these sort of relationship tune-ups. So tonight we hope that you have just a lovely time building your friendship levels, or buttressing, exploring them, and decorating your house. And we're going to turn the time over to Catherine, who's going to give us our instructions for our little activity we have for you to do. So thank you all.